Take a slow breath. You're safe here. This is a story from Moonlight Japanese Sleep Stories. Moonlight on the Wooden Bridge. Prologue. The bridge that remembers. The wooden bridge lay quietly across the river. It had been there longer than most memories in the town. Longer than the current shop signs, longer than the paved road, longer even than the habit of locking doors at night. The bridge was made of dark wood, worn smooth by time and touch. Each plank carried marks that no one noticed anymore: slight bends, faint cracks, places where the grain had risen like breath beneath the surface. At night, the bridge belonged to the moon. Moonlight descended slowly, settling on the river first. The water accepted it in fragments, breaking the light into trembling pieces that drifted downstream. From there, the glow climbed upward, touching the underside of the bridge, then spreading across the planks like a thin, pale blanket. The bridge did not shine. It absorbed the light. It had learned how to do that over many years. The bridge remembered footsteps. Not individually, but collectively. The weight of children running. The careful pace of elders. The hesitation of those who stopped in the middle, unsure whether to continue. It remembered voices, too. Not words, but tone. Laughter that rose and disappeared. Silence that lingered long after people had gone. On this night, the town beyond the river slept deeply. Windows were dark. Curtains barely moved. The single street light near the post office hummed softly, as if trying not to disturb anyone. The river flowed without urgency. The bridge waited. Chapter 1. The town beyond the river. The town was called Tsukimori. It was not a place people searched for. It appeared on maps only if one looked closely, written in small characters between larger, more important names. Most people passed nearby without knowing it was there. Tsukimori rested between low mountains and a wide river. In the daytime, it seemed ordinary. A convenience store, a post office, a quiet schoolyard, and a shrine partially hidden by cedar trees. At night, the town softened. Sounds became distant. Shapes lost their sharp edges. The river took the lead, its presence steady and continuous, like a long breath drawn in and released again and again. A man stood at the edge of the town, facing the wooden bridge. His name was Ren Aoyama. He had not planned to return here. Plans, he had learned, often changed without warning. Still, he stood there now, holding the handle of a small suitcase, the scent of damp wood and river water rising into the air around him. He looked at the bridge. It looked the same. Ren stepped forward and placed one foot onto the first plank. The wood responded with a quiet sound, not a complaint, not a greeting, but recognition. He paused, then stepped fully onto the bridge. The river moved beneath him, slow and dark. The moon's reflection broke apart with each ripple, then reassembled itself again. Ren exhaled. Behind him, a voice reached across the night. "Aoyama? Ren?" He turned. A woman stood a short distance away, holding a bicycle by its handlebars. Her hair was tied loosely, strands escaping and catching the moonlight. She looked older than he remembered, but only slightly changed in the way time changes things that remain in the same place. "Yukari," Ren said quietly. Her eyes widened, then softened. "It really is you," she said. "You came back." "Yes," he replied. "I did." She walked closer, the tires of her bicycle making a soft sound against the gravel. She stopped near him, but did not step onto the bridge. Instead, she looked out over the river. "The bridge still creaks," she said. "Some things never change." "No," Ren said. "They don't." Silence settled between them, not awkward, not heavy. Simply present. The moonlight stretched their shadows across the bridge, long and thin. They touched briefly, then drifted apart as the moon continued its slow climb. "Do you have a place to stay?" Yukari asked. "Not yet." She hesitated, then nodded. "There's a house behind the shrine," she said. "The old caretaker's place. It hasn't been used in a long time, but it's clean." Ren understood immediately. "Thank you," he said. "That would help." She stepped onto the bridge this time, walking beside him. The wooden planks responded differently under their combined weight, each one producing its own quiet sound. Halfway across, Yukari stopped. "Ren," she said. "Yes?" She lifted her gaze toward the sky. "The moon is beautiful tonight," she said. Ren followed her eyes. The moon hung perfectly above the bridge, full and steady, as if it had always intended to be there at this exact moment. "Yes," he said, "it is." They did not say anything more. The bridge held them. The river continued. And the town, wrapped in moonlight, slept on. Chapter 2: The House Behind the Shrine. The shrine stood slightly apart from the rest of the town. During the day, it blended quietly into its surroundings, neither inviting nor refusing visitors. At night, it felt older, less like a place of worship and more like a presence that simply existed, watching without judgment. The torii gate was darkened by age. The faded paint no longer claimed attention. Instead, it absorbed moonlight gently, as if the years had taught it restraint. Ren followed the narrow path behind the shrine. The ground was uneven, shaped by rain and time. Each step produced a soft sound, quickly swallowed by the night. Yukari walked ahead of him. She carried a small flashlight in her hand but did not turn it on. The moonlight filtered through the cedar branches above them, creating slow-moving patterns on the ground. "There it is," she said quietly. The house stood a short distance away, partially hidden by trees. It was smaller than Ren remembered, or perhaps he had grown used to larger spaces elsewhere. The roof sloped gently, its tiles dark and still. The sliding doors were closed, but not locked. The house seemed to be waiting. "It hasn't changed much," Yukari said. "I come by sometimes to clean. Just in case." "Just in case," Ren repeated softly. She nodded, as if that was explanation enough. Yukari slid the door open. The sound was low and familiar, a wooden whisper that echoed briefly inside the space. Cool air drifted outward, carrying the faint scent of old tatami and cedar. She stepped aside. "Please," she said. "It's not much, but it's perfect," Ren replied. "Thank you." Inside, the house was quiet in a way that felt deliberate. Nothing rattled. Nothing creaked unnecessarily. It was as if the walls themselves understood the importance of not disturbing anyone. Moonlight entered through a small window, falling across the tatami in pale rectangles. Dust floated slowly in the light, moving without urgency. Yukari set her flashlight down near the entrance. "There are extra blankets in the closet," she said. "And I'll bring a fresh futon tomorrow morning." "You don't have to." "I know," she interrupted gently. "But I will." She looked around the room, then back at him. "You came back at the same time," she said. Ren tilted his head slightly. "At the same time?" She gestured toward the window. "The moon," she said. "It's exactly like that night." Ren did not ask which night. The answer was already there, suspended between them like the moonlight itself. "I didn't plan it," he said. "I know," Yukari replied. "Things like that never are." They stood in silence. It was not the kind of silence that demanded words. It was the kind that allowed memories to exist without being named. The kind that did not rush toward conclusions. At last, Yukari exhaled softly. "I should go," she said. "It's late." "Yes." She paused at the doorway, her hand resting lightly on the frame. "Ren," she said. He looked up. "You can stay as long as you need," she continued. "No one will mind. This place, it remembers you." Ren did not answer immediately. He simply nodded once. "Good night," she said. "Good night, Yukari." She slid the door closed gently behind her. The sound faded, and the house returned to stillness. Ren placed his suitcase beside the wall and sat down on the tatami. The floor was cool beneath him, solid and familiar. He leaned back slightly and let his hands rest on his knees. Outside, the river moved quietly. The sound reached him only faintly, softened by distance and trees. He lay down and pulled a blanket over himself. Above him, shadows from the cedar branches shifted slowly across the ceiling. They moved without pattern, without intention, like thoughts that had decided to let go. Ren closed his eyes. The wooden bridge spanned the river. The shrine stood watch behind him. And the night, deep and patient, continued to unfold. Chapter 3: The Sound of the River at Night. The river had its own voice. It was not loud, and it was not constant in the way machines were constant. Instead, it spoke in variations, slight changes in tone, subtle shifts in rhythm. It was a sound that could be ignored, but never fully disappeared. Ren lay still, listening. At first, the river felt distant, a background presence, like the hum of wind far away. But as time passed and the house remained quiet, the sound grew clearer, as if the night itself had leaned closer. Water moved around stones. Current brushed against the riverbank. Occasionally, something would touch the surface and then vanish again. Each sound blended into the next, forming a pattern that did not repeat exactly, yet never truly changed. Ren breathed slowly. He did not count his breaths. There was no need. The river kept its own measure, and his body followed without effort. The house behind the shrine held the night carefully. Its walls filtered out the sharper sounds of the town, leaving only what was soft enough to remain. The floor did not shift. The ceiling did not respond. Everything stayed where it was meant to be. Outside, the moon continued its slow passage across the sky. Light moved almost imperceptibly across the tatami. What had been bright became dimmer. Shadows stretched, then softened again. Ren turned slightly onto his side. The memory of the bridge surfaced not as an image, but as a sensation. The feeling of wood beneath his feet. The quiet acknowledgement of each step. The way the bridge had not hurried him. He wondered, briefly, how many nights like this the bridge had witnessed. How many people had stood halfway across, listening to the same river, looking at the same moon. The thought did not demand an answer. The river continued. Time loosened its shape. Moments no longer felt separate. They blended, like reflections dissolving in moving water. Ren's awareness drifted, touching the edges of sleep, then moving away again. Somewhere beyond the shrine, a night bird called once, then fell silent. The sound did not disturb the quiet. It became part of it. Ren's breathing slowed further. The house remained still. The river flowed. And gradually, without any clear boundary, wakefulness gave way. Chapter 4 Morning without urgency. Morning arrived quietly. There was no sudden brightness, no sharp sound to announce its presence. Light simply shifted, becoming softer, warmer. Shadows retreated into corners without resistance. Ren opened his eyes. For a moment, he did not move. He listened instead. The river was still there, its voice unchanged. The world had not rearranged itself while he slept. That knowledge settled gently. He sat up slowly. The tatami creaked faintly beneath him, a small acknowledgement of movement. Sunlight filtered through the window now, pale and unassuming. Outside, the shrine grounds were empty. Ren stood and slid the door open. Cool morning air entered the room, carrying the scent of earth and leaves. Somewhere nearby, a bird moved through the branches, unseen. He stepped outside. The path behind the shrine was damp with dew. Each step left a faint mark that faded almost immediately. Ren walked without a destination, simply following the curve of the ground. The river appeared between the trees, wider and calmer than it had looked at night. Its surface reflected the sky clearly now, no longer broken by moonlight. Ren stopped near the bank. He watched the water for a long time. Eventually, footsteps approached from behind. "Good morning," a voice said. Ren turned. Yukari stood a short distance away, carrying a folded futon and a small cloth bag. "You slept well?" she asked. "Yes," Ren replied. "Very well." She nodded, as if that was exactly what she had expected. "I brought what I promised," she said. "And some tea. It's nothing special. Thank you." They stood side by side, looking at the river. "The mornings here are slow," Yukari said. "They always have been." "I noticed," Ren said. "It feels kind." She smiled at that. "Yes," she said. "I think so too." They did not hurry back. The town was still waking, one quiet moment at a time. And for now, that was enough. Chapter 5 Walking through familiar streets. The streets of Tsukimori were narrow and unhurried. They curved gently, as if avoiding directness on purpose. There were no long, straight roads that encouraged speed. Each turn revealed only a little more than before. Ren walked beside Yukari without speaking. Their steps fell into a natural rhythm, not perfectly matched, but comfortable. The morning air carried the scent of bread from somewhere distant, mixed with the freshness of damp pavement. Shops were beginning to open. A sliding door lifted halfway, then fully. A sign was turned from closed to open with quiet care. Somewhere, a radio played softly, the volume kept low out of habit. "This place hasn't changed much," Ren said. Yukari nodded. "Some things did," she replied. "But not the things people notice right away." They passed the post office. Its walls were slightly more faded than Ren remembered. The mailbox had been replaced, but it stood in the same spot, receiving the same gestures. A man swept the sidewalk in front of a small shop. He paused when he noticed Ren. "Ren?" he asked, uncertain. "Yes," Ren answered. The man smiled, recognition settling in. "You're back," he said. "It's been a long time." "Yes," Ren said again. "It has." The man nodded once, as if satisfied, then returned to his sweeping. No questions followed. In Tsukimori, arrival was acknowledged, not examined. They continued walking. The schoolyard appeared at the end of the street. The gate was open, though no children had arrived yet. The swings moved slightly in the breeze, empty but ready. Yukari slowed her steps. "Do you remember," she asked, "how we used to cross the bridge together after school?" Ren looked toward the river, visible beyond the buildings. "I do," he said. "We always tried to step on the same planks." She smiled faintly. "And we never managed to," she said. "No," Ren agreed. "We didn't." They stopped near a vending machine, its lights humming softly. Yukari bought 2 cans of tea and handed one to him. "Here," she said. "Thank you." The can was cool in his hand. Ren did not open it right away. He simply held it, grounding himself in the small, ordinary sensation. "I'm glad you came back," Yukari said. Ren considered the words carefully before answering. "So am I," he said. They stood there for a moment longer, listening to the town as it fully woke around them. Then they continued walking. Chapter 6: The Bridge in Daylight. By midday, the bridge no longer belonged to the moon. Sunlight revealed details that night had softened. The grain of the wood was clearer now. The small imperfections stood out, marks left by rain, by heat, by countless footsteps. Ren stopped at the edge of the bridge. "It looks different," he said. Yukari nodded. "It always does," she replied. "But it's still the same bridge." They stepped onto it together. In daylight, the river moved with a different voice. Brighter, more open. The water reflected the sky in wide, calm shapes. Ren rested his hands on the railing and looked down. "When I left," he said, "I thought this place would disappear." Yukari turned to him. "But it didn't," she said. "No," Ren said. "It didn't." A breeze moved across the bridge, carrying the scent of water and trees. It lifted Yukari's hair slightly, then passed on. "Some people leave," she said. "And some things stay." Ren listened. "And sometimes," she continued, people come back?" He did not answer right away. "Yes," he said at last. "Sometimes they do." They crossed the bridge slowly, neither of them in a hurry. The river flowed beneath them, unchanged in its patience. Chapter 7: The Afternoon Without Plans. The afternoon unfolded without direction. There was no schedule to follow, no obligation waiting at the end of the day. Time loosened, stretching gently, allowing moments to exist without needing purpose. Ren and Yukari returned to the house behind the shrine. The futon she had brought earlier lay neatly folded in the corner, untouched. Sunlight filtered through the trees, casting slow-moving patterns across the floor. "I'll make some tea," Yukari said. Ren nodded. She moved quietly, filling the kettle, lighting the stove. Each action was unhurried, performed with familiarity rather than intention. The sound of water heating filled the space softly, then faded into silence again. Ren sat near the window. Outside, leaves shifted lazily in the breeze. The shrine remained still, its presence steady and unassuming. Somewhere beyond the trees, the river continued its long conversation with the land. Yukari set 2 cups of tea between them. "Careful," she said. "It's hot." Ren lifted his cup, feeling the warmth travel into his hands. "Thank you." They drank slowly. No one spoke. The silence was not empty. It held the weight of shared history, but it did not press down. It simply existed, allowing both of them to rest within it. After a while, Yukari spoke. "Are you staying long?" she asked. "I don't know," Ren answered honestly. "I didn't decide." She accepted that without comment. "That's fine," she said. "This town doesn't ask for decisions right away." Ren looked around the room again. "It feels like time moves differently here," he said. Yukari smiled. "Or maybe," she said, "it just moves honestly." The afternoon light shifted. What had been bright softened into something more muted. Shadows grew longer, then steadied. Ren leaned back slightly. His thoughts wandered, then thinned. The sound of cicadas rose faintly, then faded again, as if unsure whether it was time to begin. Eventually, Ren closed his eyes. Not to sleep. Just to rest. Chapter 8: Evening approaches the river. Evening arrived gradually, almost apologetically. The heat of the day receded. The air cooled, drawing deeper breaths from the earth. Colors softened, losing their sharpness as light tilted toward gold. Ren and Yukari walked toward the river again. The path was familiar now, their steps steady. The town moved at a slower pace in the evening. Shops are prepared to close. Voices lowered naturally. The bridge came into view, stretching across the river with quiet confidence. "It always feels different in the evening," Yukari said. "Yes," Ren agreed. "Like it's waiting for night." They stopped near the center of the bridge. The river reflected the sky, which was slowly deepening into blue. The first hints of moonlight lingered just beyond sight, waiting its turn. "I used to think," Ren said, "that if I left, I could stop thinking about this place." Yukari listened. "But I didn't," he continued. "It stayed with me." She nodded. "Places like this do that," she said. "They don't let go easily." They leaned against the railing. The wind moved gently across the water. A ripple passed beneath them, then another. Night was approaching, step by step. Chapter 9: The Return of Moonlight. When the moon finally appeared, it did so quietly. It rose without announcement, slipping into the sky as if it had always been there. Its light reached the river first, then climbed upward, familiar and calm. Ren watched as moonlight returned to the bridge. "It's the same," he said. "Yes," Yukari replied. "It always comes back." The bridge accepted the light again, absorbing it without reflection. The planks seemed to settle, recognizing the hour. Ren stood still. The night air wrapped around him, cool and steady. The town behind them faded into quiet. The river carried the moon's reflection downstream, just as it had the night before. "Thank you," Ren said suddenly. Yukari turned to him. "For what?" "For letting me come back," he said. "For not asking too much." She considered that. "You didn't leave anything unfinished," she said. "You just stepped away." Ren felt the truth of it settle slowly. They remained on the bridge until the sky deepened fully into night. The bridge held them. The river moved beneath them. And moonlight rested once more on the wooden planks. Chapter 10: Night settles in. Night returned without ceremony. The town lights dimmed one by one, not all at once, but in a scattered pattern that felt natural. A window went dark. A sign was switched off. Somewhere, a door slid closed and remained that way. Ren and Yukari left the bridge together. Their footsteps echoed softly, then disappeared. The path back toward the shrine was familiar now, traced twice in a single day, yet it felt different under the night air. Cooler. Calmer. "I'll head back here," Yukari said near the fork in the path. "My place is just ahead." Ren nodded. "Thank you for today," he said. "It meant more than I expected." She smiled, not brightly, but warmly. "I'm glad," she said. "Tomorrow we'll be here too." "Yes," Ren replied. "It will." They stood for a moment longer, as if listening to the night confirm her words. "Good night, Ren," Yukari said. "Good night, Yukari." She turned and walked away, her steps unhurried, gradually blending into the quiet. Ren continued alone toward the house behind the shrine. The path seemed narrower at night, but not threatening. The cedar trees stood like old guardians, their shadows stretching across the ground in long, steady shapes. When Ren reached the house, he slid the door open and stepped inside. The interior was cool and dark, illuminated only by moonlight filtering through the window. He did not turn on a light. There was no need. He laid out the futon carefully, smoothing it with slow, deliberate movements. Each action grounded him further in the moment. Ren lay down. The house accepted his weight without sound. Outside, the river continued its quiet speech. The shrine stood watch. The bridge, just beyond sight, rested beneath the moon. Ren closed his eyes. Thoughts came and went without insistence. Memories drifted past, softened, losing their edges before they could settle. His breathing slowed. The night deepened. Chapter 11 A Dream Without Images. Sleep arrived gently. There was no sudden drop, no moment of falling. Awareness simply loosened its grip, allowing the body to sink into rest. Ren dreamed, but not in images. There were no faces, no places, no clear scenes. Instead, there were sensations. Warmth, movement, the feeling of standing still while something vast flowed past. The sound of water existed even here, not loud, not distant. It was neither inside nor outside, simply present. Time did not behave as it did when awake. Moments did not line up. They spread out, overlapping softly, like waves meeting and passing without resistance. Ren did not try to understand the dream. There was nothing to understand. Chapter 12 Before Dawn. Before dawn, the world held its breath. The air was cool and dense. The sky lightened slightly, though the sun remained hidden. Moonlight faded slowly, yielding space rather than disappearing. Ren stirred. He did not wake immediately. His awareness returned in layers, each one settling gently into place. The sound of the river reached him first. Then the feeling of the futon beneath him. Then the quiet presence of the room. He opened his eyes. The window showed a pale sky, neither night nor morning. The shrine grounds were empty, untouched. Ren lay still. There was no urgency to rise. No reason to rush forward. The day had not fully arrived yet, and the night was not in a hurry to leave. He breathed in. He breathed out. Outside, somewhere across the river, the wooden bridge waited for morning. Chapter 13 The First Light on the Bridge. The first light of morning did not arrive all at once. It appeared gradually, almost tentatively, spreading thin color across the sky. Pale gray softened into faint blue, then into something warmer, though the sun itself remained unseen. Ren stepped outside. The air was cool, carrying the scent of water and earth. Dew clung to the ground, darkening the path behind the shrine. Each step disturbed it briefly, leaving marks that faded as quickly as they formed. He walked toward the river. The town was quiet, resting in the space between sleep and waking. No doors opened. No voices rose. Even the birds seemed to wait, holding back their songs. The bridge emerged from the mist. In this light, it appeared different again. Less defined. The edges softened by the thin fog rising from the river. It looked less like a structure and more like a continuation of the land itself. Ren stepped onto the bridge. The wood felt cool beneath his feet. The planks responded with familiar sounds, gentle and unhurried. Each step was acknowledged, then released. He stopped at the center. The river below moved steadily, its surface reflecting the changing sky. The moon's presence had faded, but its influence lingered, like a memory that had not fully dissolved. Ren rested his hands on the railing. The bridge did not demand anything from him. It did not ask why he had returned, or how long he would stay. It simply allowed him to stand there. A soft sound reached him from behind. Footsteps. "Good morning," Yukari said. Ren turned. She stood a few steps away, hands tucked into the sleeves of her jacket. Her hair was still slightly disordered, as if she had stepped outside without much preparation. "Good morning," Ren replied. She joined him at the railing. "I thought you might be here," she said. He nodded. "I couldn't sleep anymore," he said. "But I wasn't tired." She understood. They stood together in silence, watching as the sky brightened. Slowly, the fog began to lift, revealing more of the river's surface. "This is my favorite time," Yukari said quietly. "Before everything starts moving again." "Yes," Ren agreed. "It feels complete." The sun finally began to rise, its light reaching the bridge in soft layers rather than sharp lines. The wood warmed gradually, responding to the change. Ren breathed in deeply. For the first time in a long while, the day did not feel like something to endure. Chapter 14 Small Motions of Morning. Morning resumed its quiet work. Shutters opened. A bicycle passed by slowly, its bell untouched. Somewhere, a kettle began to boil, its sound traveling briefly before fading. Ren and Yukari left the bridge and walked back toward town. They stopped at a small shop near the corner. Its sign was old, the lettering slightly uneven. Inside, Shelves held simple items arranged without urgency. The shopkeeper looked up. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," Yukari replied. The woman glanced at Ren, then smiled. "You must be back," she said. "Yes," Ren answered. "That's good," she said simply. "Take your time." Ren purchased 2 rice balls wrapped carefully in paper. They stepped outside and sat on a low wall near the river. The food was warm. The taste familiar. Ren ate slowly, aware of each bite. "It's strange," he said. "How something so small can feel like enough." Yukari smiled. "This town is made of small things," she said. "They add up." A breeze moved across the water. Ripples followed, then smoothed out again. Morning continued, unforced. Chapter 15. The day opens gently. The day unfolded without resistance. Clouds drifted lazily across the sky. The river brightened. The bridge stood fully revealed now, no longer softened by mist, yet still unchanged in its quiet presence. Ren felt no need to decide anything. He walked through the town again, alone this time. Familiar streets welcomed him without comment. The schoolyard filled slowly with voices that rose, then blended into the background. He stopped once more at the bridge. The wooden planks were warm now, holding the sun's memory. Ren stood there for a long time. The river flowed. The town lived. The bridge remained. And for now, that was enough. Chapter 16. The afternoon light on wood. Afternoon light settled gently across the town. It did not press down or demand attention. Instead, it rested on surfaces quietly, on rooftops, on stone walls, on the wooden planks of the bridge. Everything seemed to accept it without reaction. Ren returned to the bridge once more. This time, he did not stop at the center. He walked its full length slowly, listening to the subtle differences beneath his feet. Some planks responded with a deeper sound, others barely at all. Each had its own history, its own way of bearing weight. The river below reflected the sky in broad strokes now. The water moved steadily, unconcerned with the hour. Ren leaned against the railing at the far end. The afternoon carried warmth, but not heaviness. It was the kind of warmth that encouraged stillness rather than movement. He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, nothing had changed. And somehow, that felt comforting. Chapter 17. The house holds the day. The house behind the shrine held the afternoon carefully. Sunlight filtered through the trees, entering the room in softened shapes. Dust moved lazily in the air, visible only when it crossed the light. Ren lay on the tatami again, not to sleep, but to rest. The house made no demands of him. It did not expect productivity, answers, or plans. It simply offered space. Outside, a breeze stirred the leaves. The sound passed through the open window and continued on its way. Ren breathed slowly. The boundary between thought and sensation blurred. Time thinned, stretching into something wide and gentle. He remained there for a long while. Chapter 18 The Town in Quiet Motion. Later, Ren walked through the town once more. People moved through their routines calmly. A woman watered plants in front of her home. A child waited for a bus, swinging a bag gently at their side. A shopkeeper rearranged items on a shelf, then rearranged them again. No one hurried. Ren felt himself match their pace without effort. At a small intersection, he paused, unsure which way to go. He chose a direction at random and continued on. The street curved, then opened onto the riverbank again. The bridge was always there. Ren smiled faintly at the familiarity of it. Chapter 19 Evening returns. Evening approached once more. The light softened, colors deepened, and shadows lengthened across the ground. The temperature shifted slightly, inviting slower movements. Ren met Yukari near the river. "You walk a lot," she said. "Yes," Ren replied. "I think I needed to." She nodded. "That makes sense." They stood side by side, watching the sky begin its gradual transformation. "Do you feel different?" she asked. Ren considered the question. "No," he said. "I feel settled." Yukari smiled. "That's good," she said. They walked toward the bridge together as the first stars appeared faintly overhead. Chapter 20 Moonlight finds its place again. Night arrived, patient and familiar. The moon rose once more, tracing a path it knew well. Its light returned to the river, then to the bridge, settling into the wood as if it had never left. Ren stood on the bridge, breathing in the night air. The river carried the moon's reflection downstream, breaking it apart and reforming it endlessly. "It always comes back," Ren said softly. "Yes," Yukari replied. "It does." They remained there, letting the night deepen around them. The bridge held. The river flowed. And moonlight rested where it belonged. Chapter 21 Night deepens without weight. Night settled more deeply into the town. It did not arrive as a sudden change, but as a gradual thickening of quiet. Sounds grew fewer. Movements slowed. Even the river seemed to lower its voice, though it never truly stopped speaking. Ren returned to the house behind the shrine. He moved without turning on lights, guided by familiarity rather than sight. The moonlight entering through the window was enough, tracing gentle lines across the tatami. He laid out the futon again. The motion felt natural now, as if he had done it every night for years instead of just a few. The house accepted him without hesitation. Ren lay down. Outside, the cedar trees swayed slightly, their branches brushing against one another in slow, patient gestures. The sound was soft, steady, and reassuring. Ren's breathing gradually aligned with the rhythm of the night. Thoughts drifted by, but none stayed long enough to become heavy. They passed like clouds, changing shape, then dissolving. The town slept. The bridge rested beneath the moon. And night continued, calm and unburdened. Chapter 22. Sleep comes easily. Sleep came without effort. There was no struggle, no resistance. Ren's awareness loosened naturally, as if it had been waiting for permission to rest. His body grew warm beneath the blanket. Muscles released their quiet tension one by one, until nothing remained to be held. The sound of the river followed him gently, neither inside nor outside his dreams. It existed as a constant presence, steady and familiar. If there were dreams, they were soft. They carried no urgency, no images that demanded attention. Only motion, warmth, and a sense of being held by something larger and patient. Ren slept. Chapter 23. The slow edge of morning. Morning approached slowly. Before light appeared, there was a subtle shift in the air. A thinning of darkness. A quiet anticipation that did not ask to be acknowledged. Ren stirred. He did not open his eyes at once. He remained still, listening to the space around him. The house was unchanged. The river continued. The world remained intact. When he finally sat up, pale light filled the room. The shrine grounds were visible through the window, washed in soft gray. Dew clung to leaves and stones alike, catching what little light there was. Ren stood and stretched gently. There was no stiffness, no urgency to move quickly. His body responded calmly, as if it had rested exactly as much as it needed to. He stepped outside. The air was cool and clean. Somewhere nearby, a bird began to sing, its call tentative at first, then steadier. Ren walked toward the river once more. Chapter 24. The bridge at dawn again. The bridge emerged from the morning mist. Its outline was clear enough, but softened at the edges, as if it were part of the air rather than separate from it. The wooden planks held a faint sheen of moisture, reflecting the pale sky. Ren stepped onto the bridge. The sound beneath his feet was familiar now, almost comforting. Each step was answered, then released. He stopped near the center. The river moved steadily below, carrying reflections of clouds that had not yet fully formed. The moon was gone, but its memory lingered in the quiet confidence of the bridge. Ren rested his hands on the railing. He felt no need to stay, and no need to leave. This moment was complete on its own. Footsteps approached. "Good morning," Yukari said softly. Ren turned and smiled. "Good morning." She joined him, looking out over the water. "It's a good day," she said. "Yes," Ren replied. "It is." They stood together as the sky brightened, letting the day arrive in its own time. Chapter 25. A Day Without Conclusion. The day opened gently, without asking for decisions. Ren walked back toward town with Yukari, then parted ways again without ceremony. There was no sense of separation, only the understanding that paths could cross naturally when needed. He spent the morning wandering. He watched the river from different angles. He sat beneath trees. He listened to the distant sounds of town life without feeling pulled toward them. Time passed, but it did not feel like something being used up. It felt like something being given. Chapter 26. Afternoon shadows lengthen. The afternoon moved quietly toward evening. Shadows stretched across the ground, lengthening without urgency. Trees cast wider shapes now, their outlines softening as the sun lowered in the sky. The town adjusted naturally, as it always did. Ren sat near the riverbank. The water reflected the changing light, shifting from brightness to something deeper and calmer. The surface moved steadily, neither fast nor slow, as if it followed a rhythm older than the town itself. Ren watched without thinking. He did not search for meaning. He did not try to name what he felt. The moment did not require explanation. A breeze passed over the water, cool against his skin. Leaves stirred briefly, then settled again. Time continued. Chapter 27. Familiar voices at dusk. As evening approached, voices returned softly to the town. Not many, and not loudly. A greeting exchanged across a street. A quiet laugh drifted from an open window. Sounds that belonged here, that did not intrude. Ren passed by the convenience store. The light inside glowed warmly, inviting but not insistent. He stepped in, the door chiming gently behind him. The shelves were orderly, unchanged. The clerk looked up. "Good evening," she said. "Good evening," Ren replied. She glanced at him, then smiled. "You're staying, then," she said. "For now," Ren answered. "That's good," she said. "Even if it's just for a while." Ren nodded. Outside again, dusk settled fully. The sky deepened into muted colors, preparing for night. Chapter 28. The bridge holds the evening. Ren returned to the bridge. It stood quietly against the darkening sky, its shape clear and familiar. Evening light rested on the wood, bringing out the texture of each plank. He walked across slowly. The river beneath reflected the sky's last light, carrying it downstream where it thinned and disappeared. Ren stopped near the center. He rested his hands on the railing, feeling the wood beneath his palms. Warm from the day, cooling now as night approached. The bridge did not hurry him. It never had. Chapter 29. Night gathers gently. Night gathered itself around the town. The first stars appeared, faint and steady. Lights flickered on in homes, one by one, like quiet acknowledgments rather than announcements. Ren left the bridge and walked toward the shrine. The path felt different now, darker, but still welcoming. The cedar trees stood tall, their silhouettes blending into the night sky. At the house, Ren slid the door open and stepped inside. Moonlight entered the room slowly, tracing the familiar shapes of the walls and floor. The house seemed to settle around him, as if recognizing his return again. He prepared the futon. Each movement was unhurried, each sound softened by the night. Ren lay down. Chapter 30. Sleep without distance. Sleep came close, almost immediately. There was no gap between wakefulness and rest, no sharp boundary to cross. Awareness simply eased, like a hand releasing its grip. Ren's breathing slowed. The river's sound followed him, steady and continuous. It did not pull him anywhere. It simply remained. The night held. The bridge rested beneath the moon once more. And sleep arrived, complete and unbroken. Chapter 31. Before the moon sets. Before the moon set, the world grew quieter still. It was not a silence of absence, but one of completion. As if the night, having done all it needed to do, had settled into rest itself. Ren slept deeply. The house behind the shrine held the darkness carefully, keeping it from becoming heavy. Moonlight slid slowly across the floor, then retreated, leaving the room dimmer than before. Outside, the river continued its steady movement. The moon lowered gradually, its reflection stretching thin across the water before breaking apart and drifting away. Nothing resisted the change. Chapter 32. The light that follows. Light returned gently. It did not replace the night so much as follow it, stepping into the spaces it left behind. The sky lightened in stages, each one subtle enough to be almost mist. Ren woke without effort. His eyes opened naturally. His breathing was calm. The world greeted him quietly, without expectation. He sat up and listened. The river was still there. The town was still there. The bridge waited, as it always did. Ren stood and slid the door open. Cool air entered the room, carrying the faint scent of water and leaves. The shrine grounds were still empty, untouched by the day's movement. He stepped outside. Chapter 33 Walking Without Destination. Ren walked without a destination. He followed paths that felt familiar, even when he could not remember walking them before. The ground rose slightly, then leveled out again. Trees parted, then closed around him. Time did not press forward. It moved alongside him, matching his pace. He reached the river without realizing he had been heading there. The bridge stood ahead, softened by morning mist. Ren smiled faintly. Chapter 34 The Bridge and the Breath. Ren stepped onto the bridge. The wood responded quietly beneath his feet, as it always had. Each plank accepted his weight, then released it. He stopped near the center. The river flowed below, carrying reflections of the sky that had not yet settled into color. Mist hovered close to the surface, lifting slowly as the air warmed. Ren rested his hands on the railing. He breathed in. He breathed out. The bridge seemed to breathe with him. Chapter 35 A voice beside the river. Footsteps approached softly. "I thought you might be here," Yukari said. Ren turned. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," she replied. She joined him at the railing, standing close enough to share the view without touching. "The mornings feel longer lately," she said. "Yes," Ren answered. "They do." They stood together, letting the light grow stronger around them. Chapter 36 The day begins again. The day began quietly and without announcement. Birdsong rose gradually, then settled into a steady background. Somewhere in town, a door opened. A bicycle passed by slowly. Ren and Yukari left the bridge together. They walked toward town, their steps unhurried, their pace unspoken but shared. The river continued behind them. The bridge remained, and the day unfolded, just as it always had, patient, steady, and complete. Chapter 37 The afternoon that repeats. The afternoon returned in a familiar shape. Light settled once more across the town, touching the same surfaces it had touched before. Roof tiles warmed. The bridge absorbed the sun quietly. The river reflected the sky in wide, unbroken patterns. Ren recognized the repetition, but it did not feel empty. It felt steady. He walked through the town again, his steps unhurried. The same streets curved gently ahead of him. The same corners opened into small, ordinary views. Nothing asked him to hurry. Nothing asked him to stop. At the river bank, he sat and watched the water. The afternoon passed. Chapter 38 The bridge as part of the day. The bridge no longer felt like a destination. It had become part of the path itself. Ren crossed it without pausing, then crossed it again later, just as naturally. The wood responded the same way each time, consistent and calm. A group of children ran across, their laughter light and brief. The bridge accepted them without complaint, then returned to stillness. Wren smiled faintly. Life moved across the bridge, not through it. Chapter 39. Evening without announcement. Evening arrived again. No bells rang. No clear line marked the shift. Light simply changed its quality, becoming deeper, slower. Wren met Yukari near the river. "Another quiet day," she said. "Yes," Wren replied. "A good one." They leaned against the railing, watching the sky adjust. The river carried the evening gently. Chapter 40. Moonlight without surprise. The moon rose again. It no longer surprised Wren. It felt expected, welcome, familiar. Moonlight returned to the bridge, settling into the wood as it always had. The planks absorbed it, holding the glow without reflecting it outward. Wren stood in the same place he had stood before. Nothing felt unfinished. Chapter 41. Night holds what remains. Night deepened. The town dimmed. Sounds softened. The river's voice lowered further, though it never fell silent. Wren returned to the house behind the shrine. He prepared the futon, each movement already known. The house responded quietly, holding the night without weight. Wren lay down. Sleep came without resistance. Chapter 42. Dreams that do not ask. Dreams passed through him lightly. They did not demand interpretation. They did not linger. They moved like water, touching briefly, then continuing. Wren slept. The bridge rested beneath the moon. The river flowed. Chapter 43. Morning returns once more. Morning arrived, familiar and unchanged. Light filtered into the room. The air cooled and shifted. The shrine grounds remained still. Wren woke calmly. There was no need to measure time. The day was already enough. Chapter 44. Standing still on the bridge. Wren stood on the bridge again. He did not look for meaning this time. He did not reflect on the past or imagine the future. He simply stood. The river flowed beneath him. The town lived around him. The bridge held him. Nothing more was required. Chapter 45. The town accepts him. The town did not announce its acceptance. It did not offer words or gestures that marked a clear moment of change. Instead, it simply adjusted around Wren, making space for him as naturally as it did for rain or wind. People greeted him without surprise now. "Good morning," they said. "Good evening," Wren answered in kind. He was no longer back. He was simply there. Chapter 46. A place at the table. One afternoon, Yukari invited Wren to stay for dinner. "It's nothing special," she said. "Just something simple." "That's fine," Ren replied. "I like simple." They sat at a low table near the window. Outside, the light softened toward evening. The river reflected the changing sky, steady and patient. They ate slowly. The food was warm. The silence between them was comfortable. "You can stay as long as you want," Yukari said again, as if confirming something that had already been decided. Ren nodded. "I know," he said. Chapter 47: The Bridge as Habit. The bridge became a habit. Ren crossed it without thought, sometimes several times a day. Morning, afternoon, evening, night. Each crossing felt the same, and yet slightly different. The wood warmed and cooled. The river brightened and darkened. The sky shifted endlessly above. The bridge never changed its response. It held. Chapter 48: The Quiet Weight of Staying. Staying carried its own weight. Not heavy, but present. Ren noticed it in small ways, in how he recognized footsteps before turning, in how the town's rhythms aligned with his own, in how days no longer needed to be counted. He did not question it. The weight did not ask to be lifted. Chapter 49: Rain on the Wooden Planks. Rain arrived one afternoon. It began softly, almost politely, darkening the wood of the bridge plank by plank. The river responded with a deeper voice, welcoming the change. Ren stood beneath the eaves near the bridge, listening. Rain fell steadily, without urgency. The town accepted it. So did Ren. Chapter 50: Night After Rain. The night after the rain felt different. The air was heavier, filled with the scent of wet earth and leaves. Moonlight reflected off damp surfaces, soft and diffused. Ren crossed the bridge slowly. The wood was cool beneath his feet, slick but steady. Each step was careful, respectful. The river carried the rain onward. The night held everything gently. Chapter 51: Sleep Deepens. Sleep deepened. Not suddenly, but thoroughly. Ren slept without dreams he could remember. His rest felt complete, unbroken by thought or memory. The house behind the shrine remained still. Outside, the river flowed on. Chapter 52: Morning After Rain. Morning after rain arrived, clean and clear. The sky opened wide. The town glistened briefly, then dried. Leaves held droplets that caught the light, then released them. Ren walked toward the bridge. The wood had lightened again, returning to its familiar tone. Everything resumed. Chapter 53: The River Does Not Ask. The river did not ask where Ren had been. It did not ask how long he would stay. It flowed. Ren stood beside it and watched. That was enough. Chapter 54: Evening as Continuation. Evening came not as an ending, but as a continuation. Light faded. Sounds softened. The bridge accepted moonlight once more. Ren stood at the center and breathed. The day closed itself gently. Chapter 55. The town at rest. The town rested. Windows darkened. Doors closed. Paths emptied. Ren returned to the house behind the shrine. Sleep came easily. The bridge waited. The river moved. Chapter 56. Days without names. The days began to lose their names. They were no longer clearly divided into weekdays and weekends, no longer measured by calendars or plans. Morning arrived, evening followed, and night settled in between, each part flowing into the next without edges. Ren did not mark the passing of time. He woke when light entered the room. He rested when darkness returned. That was enough. Chapter 57. The river as measure. The river became the measure of the day. In the morning, it was pale and open, reflecting the wide sky. In the afternoon, it deepened, carrying the weight of light. At night, it softened, holding reflections gently before letting them go. Ren watched these changes without naming them. The river did not repeat itself exactly. Neither did the day. Chapter 58. A place for shoes. One evening, Ren noticed something small. His shoes sat near the entrance of the house behind the shrine, placed there without thought, angled slightly inward. They had been there for days now, unmoved. They looked as though they belonged. The realization did not surprise him. It settled quietly. Chapter 59. A voice calling his name. As Ren crossed the bridge one afternoon, a voice called out, "Ren." He turned. An older man stood near the river bank, holding a fishing rod. His posture was relaxed, familiar. "I thought that was you," the man said. "It's good to see you around." "It's good to be here," Ren replied. The man nodded, satisfied. No more was needed. Chapter 60. The bridge in wind. Wind moved through the town that evening. It passed over the bridge, slipping between the planks, brushing against the railing. The wood responded with low, patient sounds. Ren stood still and felt it pass. The bridge did not resist the wind. Neither did he. Chapter 61. Evening light in the house. Evening light entered the house behind the shrine at a different angle now. It reached farther across the floor, touching places it had not touched before. Dust moved slowly through the air, visible for only a moment. Ren watched until the light faded. The room did not change. Chapter 62. Quiet companionship. Some evenings, Yukari walked with Ren. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they did not. Neither felt the need to decide which. Their footsteps aligned naturally. When they parted, it was without ceremony. The town held them both. Chapter 63. Night without distance. Night no longer felt distant. It did not arrive from somewhere else. It unfolded from the day itself, as naturally as breath leaving the body. Ren lay down and slept. The bridge rested beneath the moon. The river flowed. Chapter 64. Waking in the same place. Ren woke knowing exactly where he was. There was no moment of adjustment, no sense of dislocation. The house behind the shrine was not unfamiliar or temporary. It was simply the place he was. He sat up and listened. The world was steady. Chapter 65. Morning walks continue. Morning walks continued. Ren followed the river, crossed the bridge, and returned. The paths did not change, yet they never felt worn. Each step was new enough. The town woke slowly around him. Chapter 66. The bridge does not keep count. The bridge did not keep count of how many times Ren crossed it. It did not mark first or last, arrival or departure. It existed for each step equally. Ren understood this without thinking. He walked on. Chapter 67. Afternoon without weight. The afternoon carried no weight. Light rested on the town. The river moved. Leaves shifted in the breeze. Ren sat beneath a tree and closed his eyes. Time passed. Chapter 68. Evening finds him again. Evening found Ren where it always did. Near the river. Near the bridge. Near the quiet center of the town. Moonlight prepared its return. Chapter 69. The familiar rise of the moon. The moon rose, familiar and expected. Its light reached the river, then the bridge, then the town beyond. Everything was accepted without a response. Ren stood on the wooden planks and breathed. The night settled. Chapter 70. Another complete day. Another day completed itself. Not with an ending, but with rest. Ren returned to the house behind the shrine. He lay down and slept. The bridge waited. The river flowed. The town remained. Chapter 71. The season begins to shift. The change arrived quietly. It was not announced by a date or a sudden temperature difference. It appeared first in the light. The afternoon sun lingered a little longer. The shadows stretched in slightly different directions. Ren noticed without naming it. The town adjusted, as it always did. Chapter 72. Air that carries a new scent. One morning, the air felt different. Cooler, but not cold. It carried a scent that was faint and unfamiliar, layered beneath the usual presence of river and wood. Ren paused on the bridge and breathed in. The bridge accepted the new air without reaction. So did he. Chapter 73. Leaves begin to let go. Leaves began to fall. Not all at once. Not dramatically. One here, another there. They drifted down and settled wherever they landed, adding nothing, taking nothing away. Ren watched them from the river bank. The river carried some of them onward. The rest remained. Chapter 74. Evenings grow deeper. Evenings grew deeper. Not darker, but fuller. The space between sunset and night stretched, holding more quiet than before. The town seemed to breathe more slowly during these hours. Ren walked the bridge as moonlight returned. It felt unchanged. Chapter 75. The house knows the season. The house behind the shrine knew the season before Ren did. The floor cooled slightly. The air inside held warmth longer after sunset. Sounds traveled differently through the rooms. Ren adjusted without thinking. The house accepted him as it accepted the change. Chapter 76. A conversation without urgency. One evening, Yukari walked beside Ren along the river. "It feels like time has passed," she said. "Yes," Ren replied. "It has." Neither of them tried to measure how much. They continued walking. Chapter 77. The bridge at the center of everything. Ren stood at the center of the bridge once more. Not because he had planned to, but because that was where his steps brought him. The river flowed beneath. The town rested around. The sky moved above. Everything was in its place. Chapter 78. Nothing needs to change. Nothing needed to change. Ren did not need to leave. He did not need to stay longer. He did not need to decide. The day was complete without answers. Chapter 79. Night holds the town. Night held the town gently. Lights dimmed. Voices faded. The river's sound deepened, then softened again. Ren returned to the house behind the shrine. Sleep waited. Chapter 80. The bridge remains. The bridge remained. It had remained before Ren returned. It would remain after. Moonlight rested on its wooden planks, just as it always had. The river flowed beneath it. The town slept beyond it. Epilogue. Moonlight on the wooden bridge. The moon rose. Not as an ending. Not as a beginning. Simply as itself. The wooden bridge accepted the light without reflection, holding it quietly, the way it held footsteps, voices, and silence alike. Ren slept. The river flowed. And the night, patient and complete, continued just as it always would. The village that listens to the night. Prologue. Where the night begins to listen. There was a village tucked into the folds of the mountains, where the land softened into shadow before the sun had fully decided to leave. By day, it looked ordinary. A scattering of wooden houses. Narrow roads that bent without reason. Rice fields that reflected the sky in fragments. Power lines hum faintly like tired insects. But the villagers said quietly, without emphasis, that the village changed after dusk. They did not say it became dangerous. They did not say it became strange. They said only that the village listened. When night came, sound did not disappear here. It gathered. The mountains surrounding the village were old, older than the names given to them, older than the paths carved by feet and rain. At sunset, they seemed to lean closer, as if to hear what the valley would offer once human voices softened. Crickets began first. Not all at once, but one by one, testing the air. Their calls layered gently, never competing, only filling spaces. A river at the edge of the village answered with its slow, repeating breath. Wind slid through cedar branches and paused there, learning their shapes. Even the houses participated. Wood cooled and shifted. Walls sighed. Roof tiles settled into their places with small, careful sounds. And somewhere among it all, the village itself listened back. No one remembered when this began. Memory in the village was like mist present, but never held. Children grew up knowing that after dark, they should walk more slowly. That they should not shout, even in play. That if they stood still long enough, the night would notice them. Older people sometimes said the night had ears. Others said it was kinder than that. They said the night was simply awake. On certain evenings, those without moon, when clouds pressed low and the stars withdrew, the listening grew deeper. Sounds carried farther. A footstep on gravel might echo where no echo should exist. A whispered word might linger, repeating itself softly until it lost meaning and became texture. Visitors rarely noticed. They arrived, slept, and left, calling the village peaceful. But those who stayed longer began to sense it. The way silence here was never empty. The way darkness did not erase, but revealed. On such a night, long before the events of this story, a single light remained on in a house near the forest's edge. Inside, a woman sat at a low table, hands wrapped around a cup that had long since gone cold. She was listening, not for danger, not for voices. She listened the way one listens for rain that has not yet begun, certain it will come. Outside, the night leaned closer. And the village, as it always did, listened with her. Chapter 1: The Man Who Arrived After Sunset. The man arrived later than he had planned. By the time the bus released him onto the narrow roadside and pulled away with a weary sigh, the sun had already slipped behind the mountains. What remained was a bruised sky, deep blue bleeding slowly into black. He stood alone with his bag at his feet. The air felt cooler than it should have for the season. It carried the smell of wet soil and leaves, and something older, something mineral, like stone after rain. He checked the sign once more, though he already knew what it said. Kagami Village. The letters were faded, brushed on wood that had warped gently with time. "So this is it," he murmured, mostly to himself. His voice sounded different here. Softer. As if the air absorbed the sharp edges. The road leading into the village was narrow and unlit, but not fully dark. Houses glowed faintly from within, lanterns and low bulbs offering small, patient halos. No one was outside. No laughter, no conversation drifting from open windows. Only sound. His footsteps on the gravel seemed louder than they should have been. Each step arrived a moment after he placed his foot, as if the ground took time to decide whether to acknowledge him. He adjusted the strap of his bag and continued walking. The woman who rented rooms had told him to arrive before sunset. "It's easier that way," she had said over the phone. "Easier how?" he had asked. There had been a pause, just long enough to feel intentional. "You'll see the road better," she replied. Now, walking beneath a sky that deepened with every breath, he wondered what else she had meant. A dog barked somewhere far away. The sound traveled strangely, flattening as it moved, losing direction. He could not tell whether it came from the village center or the forest beyond. He slowed his pace. The houses here were close to the road, their windows dark or dimmed. Curtains were drawn. He had the uneasy sensation of passing through a place that had already gone to sleep, though the night had only just begun. Then he noticed something else. The quiet was not empty. It was layered. Crickets, wind, a distant river, the faint electrical hum of lines overhead. Even his own breathing seemed to find a place among them, fitting rather than intruding. Without realizing it, he matched his steps to the rhythm around him. By the time he reached the house marked by a small wooden plaque, he felt as though he had been walking much longer than he actually had. He slid the door open. Light spilled out, warm and steady. "Hello?" he called. For a moment, only the house answered. Wood settling. A soft clink from somewhere deeper inside. Then footsteps. An older woman appeared, her hair pulled back loosely, her movements unhurried. "You must be Mr. Arai," she said. "Yes. Sorry, I'm late." She smiled, but there was something careful in it. "You made it before full dark," she replied. "That's good. Is it?" he asked, attempting a light tone. She studied him for a second longer than politeness required. "The village sounds different once night settles," she said. "Some people find it unsettling." He hesitated, then smiled. "I think I like quiet." She nodded, as if filing the statement away. "Your room is ready," she said. "Please, come in." As he stepped fully inside, she slid the door closed behind him. The sound it made was gentle, but it lingered longer than it should have. That night, as Mr. Arai lay on his futon, listening to the unfamiliar chorus outside the thin walls, he realized something else. The sounds were not fading as he grew tired. They were becoming clearer, and somewhere between waking and sleep, he had the distinct impression that the night was listening to him, too. Chapter 2: The Shape of Quiet. Mr. Arai did not fall asleep quickly. It was not discomfort. The futon was clean, the room was warm enough, and the air gently moved through a barely open window. His body, after the long trip, was willing to rest. But his mind kept pausing. Each time he drifted towards sleep, a sound would surface, not abruptly, not loudly, but with a clarity that felt intentional. A cricket call would separate itself from the others. The river's murmur would briefly sharpen, as though a hand had brushed its surface. Even the wind, passing through the trees, seemed to hesitate near the window before continuing. He opened his eyes. The room was dark, but not completely. Moonlight slipped through the paper screen in a pale wash, softening the edges. Shadows rested where they had decided to remain. He listened. There was no single sound demanding attention. Instead, there was a balance, a careful arrangement. Nothing overlapped too much. Nothing vanished entirely. It felt less like background noise and more like a conversation that did not require his participation. At some point, his breathing slowed to match it. When he finally slept, it was without dreams. He woke before dawn. Not suddenly. Not startled. His eyes opened as if they had been waiting for the right moment. The room was filled with a gray light, the kind that arrived before color remembered itself. Outside, the night sounds had thinned, not disappeared. Crickets had quieted, replaced by a single bird testing the morning with an uncertain call. For a moment, he lay still, disoriented by how rested he felt. Then he noticed the absence. His thoughts were quiet. He sat up slowly. The house responded with soft sounds, wood acknowledging movement, fabric shifting. It felt almost courteous. After washing his face and changing clothes, he stepped outside. The village looked smaller in daylight. Paths that had seemed to stretch the night endlessly before now revealed their modest lengths. Houses stood plainly, their wood worn smooth by decades of weather and hands. Smoke rose lazily from one chimney, then another. The mountains remained. They were closer than he remembered. Not physically, he knew that was impossible, but visually, as though the morning light had removed a layer of distance. Their slopes folded into one another, dark green and unmoving. "Good morning." He turned. The woman from the house stood behind him, holding 2 cups. "You woke early," she said, offering one. "Habit," he replied, accepting it. The tea was warm, faintly bitter. She watched the mountains as she spoke. "Most people do, on their first morning." "Is that so?" She nodded. "The village doesn't sleep deeply." He considered that. "I slept better than I have in months." That earned him a glance. Not surprised, not pleased, simply attentive. "That happens too," she said. They stood in silence for a while, sharing the quiet without pressure. Finally, he asked, "Is there a place nearby where I can walk?" "A path, maybe. There are many," she replied. "But you should start with the river." "Why the river?" "It remembers how to guide people back." She said it as though it were an ordinary thing. He smiled politely, unsure how to respond. She pointed down the road. "Follow the sound." The path to the river narrowed as it left the village center. Grass grew between stones. The air cooled slightly, carrying moisture. As promised, he did not need directions. The river announced itself long before it appeared, a continuous murmur that shifted as he moved. When he reached it, he stopped. The water was shallow, clear enough to reveal stones worn smooth and pale. Sunlight fractured across its surface, creating patterns that never repeated. He crouched near the bank. The sound here was different from what it had been at night. Lighter, less dense, but still deliberate. "You came," a voice said. He looked up sharply. An older man stood a few steps away, leaning lightly on a walking stick. His clothes were simple, his expression unreadable but not unfriendly. "Sorry, mister," Arai said. "I didn't hear you." The man smiled faintly. "That's normal. I was just listening," the man finished. "Yes." They stood together, facing the water. "It sounds different here, mister," Arai said after a moment. The man nodded. "It always does. Depending on who is nearby." "Mister," Arai frowned slightly. "You mean echoes?" The man did not answer immediately. "The river listens," he said instead. "It remembers voices, footsteps, pauses. It gives them back slowly." "That sounds poetic, mister," Arai said, though his tone lacked humor. The man finally looked at him. His eyes were sharp, but calm. "You came because you couldn't sleep," he said. It was not a question. "Mister," Arai hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. And last night, you slept." "Yes." The man turned back to the river. "Then the village has accepted you, at least for now." "Accepted." The word settled uncomfortably. "What happens if it doesn't?" "Mister," Arai asked. The man tapped his stick once against a stone. Then people leave, he said. Usually without noticing why. They stood there until the sun climbed higher, until the village sounds shifted. Again voices beginning to emerge, doors opening, life resuming its gentle motion. When Mr. Arai finally turned to leave, the man was already walking away, his steps blending seamlessly into the soundscape. That night, as darkness returned and the village leaned once more into listening, Mr. Arai realized something unsettling. The sounds no longer felt unfamiliar. They felt expectant. And somewhere, beneath the layered quiet, there was space. As if the night were waiting for him to say something back. Chapter 3: What the Night Keeps. The second night arrived without ceremony. There was no sudden darkening, no clear moment when day ended and night began. Light simply thinned, draining slowly from the village until shapes learned to exist without color. Mr. Arai sat in his room with the lamp turned low. He had meant to read. A book lay open beside him, its pages unmoving. The words had stopped reaching him some time ago. They slipped away before meaning could settle. Instead, he listened. The village was different tonight. Not louder, not quieter, more aware. Sounds arrived with precision. A door sliding closed 3 houses away. Footsteps on packed earth, measured and unhurried. Somewhere, a cup set down, ceramic meeting wood with a soft, rounded note. Each sound felt placed. He lay back, eyes open, watching the faint glow of the paper screen. At some point, he realized he could distinguish layers he had never noticed before, not just what the sounds were, but where they were in relation to him. Distance had texture. Near sounds carried warmth. Far sounds felt cooler, thinner. He turned his head slightly. The night adjusted. It was a subtle thing, but unmistakable. The balance shifted, recentered, as though accommodating his movement. He exhaled slowly. The village exhaled with him. Sleep came gently this time, like a hand resting on his shoulder. He dreamed. Not images, but sounds. A footstep repeating, slower each time. Water dripping, counting something that did not require numbers. A voice speaking a name he almost recognized. When he woke, the name remained, though its owner did not. The next day passed quietly. He walked the village roads, greeting those he met. Conversations were brief, polite, and often ended before he felt ready for them to stop. People seemed content with pauses. Silence here was not an absence to be filled. At the small shop near the crossroads, he bought rice balls wrapped neatly in paper. "You're staying longer than most," the shopkeeper said as she handed them to him. "Is that unusual?" he asked. She considered. People usually know when to leave. And how do they know? She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. The nights tell them. He thanked her and stepped back outside. The wind moved differently now. It no longer surprised him when it shifted direction without warning. That evening, he returned to the river. The older man was there again, seated on a stone, his stick laid across his knees. "You came back," the man said. "I wanted to hear it at night, mister," Arai replied. The man nodded approvingly. The river sounds fuller after dark. They stood side by side as twilight deepened. "What does the night keep, mister?" Arai asked suddenly. The man glanced at him. "You felt that question forming." "Yes." The river's voice grew stronger as the light faded. "The night keeps what people don't know how to carry," the man said. Unfinished thoughts. Words never spoken. Grief that was too heavy to name. "Mister," Arai swallowed. "And it just holds them?" "For a while," the man said. "Sometimes it gives them back. Sometimes it doesn't." "And the village, mister?" Arai asked. "The village listens," the man replied. "So the night doesn't have to hold everything alone." They fell silent. Darkness settled fully now, drawing a line between the visible and the imagined. "I've been hearing things, mister," Arai said quietly. "More than before." The man's voice was gentle. "You always were. You just didn't notice." A sound drifted across the river, then not water, not wind. A voice. It was faint, but unmistakably human. "Mister," Arai's breath caught. "Did you hear that?" The man did not answer immediately. "Yes," he said finally. "It belongs to someone who stayed too long." The voice rose and fell, not forming words, but carrying emotion, regret, perhaps, or longing. "Mister," Arai took an involuntary step closer to the river. "Don't," the man said softly. He stopped. "If you answer," the man continued, "the night will remember you differently." "Differently how?" "As someone who listens back." The voice faded, dissolving into the water's sound. The night closed around them, patient. On his way back to the house, Mr. Arai noticed that his footsteps no longer echoed. They blended. That night, lying awake, he felt a question settle inside him, heavy and slow. How much of himself had he already given to the listening? And would the village, once it had learned his sound, ever truly let him go? Chapter 4: The Sound of Staying. By the fourth night, Mr. Arai stopped thinking of evening as a transition. It was no longer something that happened to the village. Night arrived here the way a tide did, not as an event, but as a return. He noticed it first in his body. His shoulders loosened as the light faded. His thoughts slowed. arranging themselves into longer, quieter shapes. Hunger came earlier. Sleepiness arrived without resistance. The village had begun to set its rhythm. That evening, he did not turn on the lamp. He sat in the dim room, letting the last blue traces of daylight dissolve through the paper screen. Outside, the familiar sounds gathered, but now he could sense the subtle differences: who was awake, who was resting, who was listening with intention. A door slid open nearby. Someone coughed softly. Farther away, laughter rose once, then stopped, as if remembering where it was. He lay down before full dark. The futon welcomed him with a familiarity that felt earned. As he closed his eyes, he became aware of a new sound. It was faint, almost imperceptible at first, a low, continuous presence beneath everything else. Not the river, not the wind. It felt closer. He opened his eyes again. The sound remained. It was like breathing, but too steady to be his own. He placed a hand on his chest, feeling the rise and fall. The rhythm did not match. For the first time since arriving, unease brushed against him. "Calm down," he whispered. The word moved into the room and settled there, absorbed. Gradually, the sound softened, thinning until it became indistinguishable from the rest of the night. Sleep took him soon after. He dreamed again. This time, there were shapes. A path winding between trees, lit only by scattered sounds. Each footstep illuminated a small patch of ground, then faded. Ahead, something waited, not threatening, not welcoming. Simply present. When he woke, the dream did not dissolve. It stayed with him, heavy and unfinished. The following days blurred gently together. He extended his stay without fully deciding to. When the woman mentioned his departure date in passing, he responded without thinking. "I'll stay a bit longer." She looked at him for a moment, then nodded. "The room will listen for you," she said. He did not ask what that meant. He spent more time walking at night now, moving slowly through the village roads under a sky that revealed only what it chose to. His footsteps felt lighter, more deliberate. The village accepted them. Once, near the forest edge, he paused and closed his eyes. Immediately, the soundscape shifted, tightening around him. He could feel distance collapse, like a circle drawing inward. When he opened his eyes, it expanded again. "You're learning," a voice said. The older man stood nearby, as if he had been there all along. "I didn't mean to, mister," Arai replied. "No one does," the man said. "Staying is rarely a decision. It's a sound you make without noticing." They walked together toward the river. "Do people disappear here, mister?" Arai asked. The man considered. Disappear is the wrong word. What, then? They become quiet, he said. Quiet enough that the village no longer distinguishes them from itself. Mr. Arai stopped walking. And you? He asked. Did you stay too long? The man smiled, but there was sadness in it. I stayed long enough, he said. They reached the river, which greeted them with a fuller voice than before. The water reflected fragments of stars, broken and reassembled by movement. I've been hearing something, Mr. Arai said. When I lie down, under everything else. The man nodded. The village's breath. That's real? As real as yours, he replied. You just haven't noticed it before. Mr. Arai stared at the water. What happens if I match it? The man's gaze sharpened. Why would you want to? He hesitated. Because it feels peaceful. That's how it sounds when you're letting go, the man said gently. Silence stretched between them, unbroken, unhurried. At last, the man spoke again. Some people come here to rest, he said. Some come to forget. A few come because they are already half listening. And me? The man watched him carefully. You're deciding whether to stay awake. That night, back in his room, Mr. Arai did something he had not done since arriving. He spoke aloud, clearly, into the dark. I hear you. The night responded not with a new sound, but with a change in balance. The air grew warmer. The layers aligned. The village listened. And this time, it listened to him. As sleep took him, one final thought drifted through his mind, slow and heavy as fog. If he stayed long enough, would there be any part of him left that did not belong to the night? Chapter 5 The Path That Does Not Close. The path appeared the night after he spoke. It was not visible at first. Mr. Arai noticed it only because the sounds changed. Where the road usually carried the familiar textures of gravel and earth, there was now a stretch where his footsteps sounded muted. As if the ground had learned to receive weight without answering it. He stopped. The village adjusted around him. Crickets paused, then resumed at a lower register. The wind slid past more carefully, avoiding the space in front of him. He looked ahead. Between two houses, where there had always been a narrow gap filled with shadow, something deeper had opened. Not darkness exactly, more like an absence of reflection. Light did not settle there. Sound thinned as it approached. A path. It did not invite him. It did not warn him away. It simply remained. He stood for a long time, listening. His breath felt loud. Behind him, the village held its balance, as if waiting to see which way his sound would fall. I'm not ready, he said quietly. The words did not echo. They were absorbed. When he stepped back, the space did not close. It remained where it was, unchanged, patient. That was what unsettled him most. The older man found him the next morning near the river. "You saw it," he said. Mr. Arai nodded. "Is that how it happens?" "One of the ways," the man replied. "It didn't feel like an ending, Mr. Arai said. More like a continuation." The man's expression softened. "That's why people mistake it." They sat on the stones in silence. "The path doesn't close," the man continued. "Once the village learns your sound, it keeps a place for it." "And if I leave, you'll still hear it," he said. "In quiet rooms, between thoughts, just faint enough to doubt." Mr. Arai watched the water move around stones that had not changed position in generations. "Did you ever walk it?" he asked. The man did not answer immediately. "Yes," he said at last. "And no." Mr. Arai turned to him. "What does that mean?" "I stepped onto it," the man said. "But I didn't disappear. I learned where to stop." "And that's possible?" "For some," he replied. "But stopping takes effort. Leaving takes less." The river's sound deepened briefly, then settled. That evening, Mr. Arai packed his bag. The act felt strange, like performing a ritual he no longer fully believed in. Each item made a sound as it was placed inside cloth folding, zippers whispering, paper shifting. The village noticed. He could feel it in the way the night leaned closer than usual, attentive but restrained. When he finished, he sat on the floor, bag beside him. "I'm leaving tomorrow," he said aloud. The night accepted the statement without reaction. Later, lying awake, he listened more carefully than ever. The village's breath was there, slow, steady, encompassing. Beneath it, something else now threaded itself through the layers. His own sound, not just breathing or heartbeat, but presence. A pattern the village had learned and stored. He realized then that leaving would not erase it, just as staying would not fully claim him. Sleep came late. At dawn, the bus arrived with its familiar mechanical sigh. Mr. Arai stood at the roadside, bag in hand. The woman from the house bowed lightly. "Safe travels." "Thank you," he replied. "For everything." She studied him for a moment. "You know how to listen now." He nodded. As the bus pulled away, the village receded, not shrinking, but folding back into itself. Sounds rearranged, returning to patterns that did not require him. Yet even as distance grew, he could still feel it. The listening. That night, far from the mountains, in a room filled with unfamiliar silence, Mr. Arai lay awake. At first, there was nothing. Then very faintly beneath the hum of the city, beneath his own breath, he heard it. A balance. A pause. A space where sound waited. He closed his eyes. Somewhere, a village listened. And somewhere else, a man, having learned how, listened back. Epilogue. The sound that remains. The city never truly slept. Even at its quietest, it breathed in fragments, air conditioners humming, distant traffic sighing through concrete corridors. A neighbor turning in bed above him. Sound here was restless, layered without listening. Mr. Arai lay still in his apartment, eyes closed. Weeks had passed since he left the village. At first, the sounds had followed him clearly. Too clearly. In the pauses between city noise, he would hear the suggestion of wind through cedar branches, the remembered weight of water moving over stone. Those had faded, or so he thought. Tonight, something was different. He had woken without knowing why, the way he used to in the village, gently, as if called by a change rather than a disturbance. His room was dark, illuminated only by the faint orange glow slipping through the curtains. He listened. At first, there was only the city. Then, beneath it so faint it could have been imagined there was a space. Not a sound. A listening. His breath slowed without effort. He did not search for the village. He had learned better than that. Listening was not an act of reaching out. It was a way of remaining still long enough for something else to arrive. And something did. Not the village itself, but what it had given him. The ability to hear when the sound was finished speaking. The awareness of pauses carried weight. The sense that silence was not empty, only patient. He remembered the older man by the river, though his face had begun to blur at the edges. The path does not close. Mr. Arai understood now. The path had never been a place. It was a threshold of attention. Anyone could step onto it. Few noticed when they did. He turned onto his side. Outside, a car passed, its sound swelling and fading. He followed it, not the noise itself, but the way it left behind a softness when it was gone. There. That was it. The sound that remains. Far away, in the mountains, the village continued as it always had. Night fell. Crickets began. The river spoke in its unbroken voice. A light turned on in a house near the forest's edge. Inside, a woman sat at a low table, hands wrapped around a cup that had gone cold, listening. Somewhere between the sounds, a new pattern rested, faint, distant, but recognizable. Someone who had learned how. The village did not call out. It did not need to. It listened, and the night, pleased not to hold everything alone, listened with it. A cup of tea before the stars fade. Prologue. When the night is almost finished. The night did not end suddenly. It thinned. Above the small town, darkness loosened its hold little by little, releasing itself without resistance. Stars remained, but fewer than before, as though some had already grown tired and quietly stepped away. The mountains surrounding the town watched without movement. Their silhouettes were soft, unfinished, familiar with this hour, the moment when night had nearly finished speaking, and morning had not yet found its voice. Sound became careful. The wind moved only when it needed to. Insects slowed their rhythm, leaving longer pauses between calls. Far away, a train passed, its sound stretched thin by distance and terrain. Near the edge of town, in a small wooden house, water began to heat. The kettle did not scream. It whispered first, gathering warmth patiently, as if aware that there was no need to hurry. A woman stood in the kitchen, her movements unhurried and precise. She had done this many times before, always at this hour, always without looking at the clock. A cup was placed on the table. Tea leaves waited in a small container, dry and quiet. Steam rose, then vanished. She poured the water slowly, letting the scent bloom and settle. The cup warmed beneath her hands. She sat down. Outside, another star faded. She did not watch it disappear. Instead, she listened to the space it left behind. Chapter 1: The Hour That Belongs to No One. The man arrived in town long after the last shop had closed. The train station was nearly empty when he stepped down onto the platform. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, steady but tired, as if they had been awake longer than they should have been. He adjusted the strap of his bag and stood still for a moment. Outside, the air felt cooler than the city he had left behind. It carried the scent of earth, old stone, and something faintly sweet, flowers he could not see, but somehow recognized. He checked the time. Too late to be early. Too early to be late. An hour that belonged to no one. As he walked through the town, he noticed how few lights were on. Houses rested in darkness, curtains drawn, windows reflecting the thinning stars rather than the rooms behind them. The road sloped gently upward. Without realizing it, his pace slowed. By the time he reached the small inn, the sky had begun to soften, black turning quietly into deep blue. He slid the wooden door open. A bell rang once, then settled into silence. Behind the counter, a woman looked up. "You arrived later than expected," she said. "I'm sorry," he replied. "The train was delayed." She nodded, unsurprised. "That happens often at this hour." She handed him a key. "You must be tired." "Yes," he said, "but not sleepy." She considered him for a moment. "Would you like some tea?" she asked. He hesitated. Tea had not been part of his plan. Neither had a conversation. But the word itself felt warm. "Yes," he said finally. "I would." She gestured toward a low table near the window. "Please, sit." Outside, the stars continued to fade one by one without ceremony. Inside, the kettle waited, already warm. The man sat down, unaware that this small pause, this cup of tea before morning, would become something the night remembered. Chapter 2. Steam rising, words settling. The tea arrived without urgency. The woman set the cup down carefully, aligning it with the grain of the table as if sound itself depended on the placement. The steam rose in thin, patient lines, then disappeared into the dim air. "Please," she said. "It's best before it cools." The man wrapped his hands around the cup. The warmth traveled slowly, not demanding attention, simply offering itself. "Thank you," he said. They sat facing one another, the window between them holding the last fragments of night. Only a few stars remained now, scattered and uncertain, as if deciding whether to stay a moment longer. "You came at a difficult hour," the woman said. "Difficult?" he asked. "For people who want answers," she replied. "This hour doesn't give them." He took a small sip. The tea was gentle, almost quiet in its flavor, but it lingered longer than he expected. "I wasn't looking for answers," he said. "That's why you noticed the tea," she replied. He looked at her, curious. "What do you mean?" "Most people drink quickly," she said. "They're already somewhere else. And me? You're still here." The kettle behind the counter released a soft click as it cooled. Wood somewhere in the building shifted, responding to the changing temperature. Outside, a bird tested the air with a single call, then fell silent again. "Do you often stay awake this late?" he asked. "Every night," she said. "That sounds tiring." She smiled faintly. "It's restful, actually. The night does most of the talking." He considered that. "And you listen." "Yes." He lowered his gaze to the tea. "What happens when the night finishes?" She followed his eyes. "Then the stars leave," she said. "And morning takes over. And you stop listening?" "No," she replied. "I just listen differently." They fell into a silence that did not ask to be filled. The man finished his tea slowly, noticing how the warmth remained even after the cup was empty. Chapter 3. The Last Stars Watching. He woke just before dawn. Not because of a sound, but because of its absence. The room was pale, washed in the earliest light. Outside, the town held itself carefully, as if aware that it was being observed. He dressed quietly and stepped outside. The air was cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and leaves. The sky was no longer dark, but not yet morning, an even, gentle gray. Only one star remained. It hovered low, faint but steady, as if waiting for permission to leave. He walked without direction, following roads that curved softly, leading him toward the hills. His footsteps sounded different here, lighter, more deliberate. Near a small shrine at the edge of town, he stopped. An older man stood there, holding a cup of tea in both hands. "You're awake early," the older man said. "So are you," the man replied. The older man nodded. "This is the hour I trust the most." "Why?" the man asked. "Because nothing is pretending yet," he said. "Night has almost finished, and morning hasn't started lying." The last star flickered. The man watched it carefully. "Does it matter when it disappears?" The older man smiled. "Only if you're watching." The star faded, not suddenly, but gently, as if exhaling. "There," the older man said. "Now it's morning." It did not feel sudden. It felt earned. Chapter 4: Those who stay until the cup is empty. He remained in the town longer than he had planned. At first, it was only one extra night. Then another. Each evening, he drank tea with the woman by the window. Each morning, he walked while the sky decided what it would become. They spoke little, but when they did, the words felt placed rather than chosen. "Will you leave soon?" she asked one night, refilling his cup. "Probably," he said. She nodded. "That's how it usually begins." "And how does it end?" She considered the steam rising between them. "Some people leave with the taste of tea still fresh," she said. "Others wait until it fades." "And you?" "I stay," she replied simply. Outside, the stars prepared themselves again. The man lifted his cup and drank slowly. For the first time in a long while, he was not thinking about what came next. He was only listening to the kettle, to the night, to the quiet space that waited patiently between one breath and the next. Chapter 5: When Morning Learns Your Name. Morning began to recognize him. Not in any dramatic way. There were no greetings shouted across streets, no sudden familiarity. It was subtler than that. The sound of his footsteps no longer stood apart from the road. The shopkeeper no longer paused before handing him change. The birds continued their calls even when he passed beneath them. It was as if the town had adjusted its balance to include him. He woke each day before sunrise now, without effort. The moment arrived naturally, like a tide reaching its quietest point before turning. One morning, as he stepped outside, the woman was already there, pouring hot water into a cup. "You're awake," she said. "Yes," he replied. "I didn't mean to be." "That's usually how it happens," she said, handing him the tea. They stood together, watching the sky lighten slowly. "Do you ever miss sleeping in?" he asked. She shook her head. "I like meeting the day before it's busy." He nodded. "It feels honest." She glanced at him. "You're starting to sound like someone who belongs here." He smiled faintly. "Is that dangerous?" She considered. "Only if you're afraid of staying." The tea steamed between them, its warmth briefly visible before disappearing into the air. Later that morning, he walked beyond the town, following a narrow path into the hills. The ground was damp, the earth dark with moisture. Each step released a quiet scent of soil and leaves. The path curved gently, never insisting on direction. He stopped where the trees opened slightly, revealing a wide view of the valley below. From here, the town looked smaller. Not distant, simply held. He sat on a flat stone and listened. There was more silence here, but it was not empty. Wind passed through the branches above him, rearranging itself. Insects resumed their daytime rhythm. Far below, the town made its soft, collective sound. For the first time, he noticed something else. Between these sounds, there was a pause that felt intentional. As if the morning itself were listening. That evening, he returned to the inn later than usual. The woman looked up as he entered. "You walked far," she said. "Yes," he replied. "I didn't realize how far until I turned around." "That's another sign," she said. "Of what?" She poured tea before answering. "Of listening forward instead of back." He accepted the cup. "Is that bad?" "No," she said. "It just means the town will start asking you questions." He raised an eyebrow. "I haven't heard any." She smiled. "It doesn't use words." Outside, the first stars appeared tentative, scattered. He watched them through the window. "Do they always come back?" "Yes," she said. "But not the same ones." He thought about that longer than necessary. That night, sleep came slowly. Not because he was restless, but because he was attentive. Sounds passed through the room: the kettle cooling, wood settling, someone walking outside, and then stopping, as if remembering the time. At some point, he realized he could sense when the night was about to change. Not the exact moment, but the direction. Like a breath preparing to turn. He did not open his eyes. He simply listened. And the night, recognizing the sound of someone who was no longer passing through, made room for him. Chapter 6: The Weight of an Empty Cup. The cup felt different when it was empty. He noticed it one morning as he lifted it from the table. When full, it carried warmth, scent, and a quiet purpose. Empty, it held something else: a lightness that was not the same as absence. He turned it slightly in his hands. "You're paying attention to the wrong part," the woman said gently. He looked up. "What should I be paying attention to?" She gestured toward the window. "What remains after you set it down?" He placed the cup back on the table. The warmth lingered. Not heat exactly, but a memory of it. The table beneath the cup seemed to hold that memory as well, as if reluctant to let it go. "I used to think leaving meant finishing something," he said. "And now?" she asked. "Now it feels like leaving might interrupt it." She nodded slowly. "That's when the weight appears." He frowned. "Wait?" "Yes," she said. "Not of staying. Of choosing." They drank in silence. Outside, the morning had already begun to move. Doors slid open. A bicycle passed, its sound steady and unhurried. Somewhere, a radio played softly, then was turned down. The town was awake now, fully claimed by daylight. "And if I don't choose?" he asked. She met his eyes. "Then time will choose for you." That afternoon, he walked to the station. Not because he intended to leave, but because he wanted to hear it again. The platform was empty, the rails stretching away in both directions. A timetable hung on the wall, its paper faded, edges curling slightly. He sat on a bench and listened. The station had its own sound, a hollow patience, shaped by arrivals and departures. Even when no train was present, the space seemed to anticipate one. He imagined himself standing here with his bag, watching the town recede. The image did not feel wrong. It just felt incomplete. When he stood to leave, the station did not respond. It did not try to hold him. It simply remained available. That night, the older man appeared again. They stood near the edge of town, where the road thinned, and the dark grew deeper. "You walked to the station," the older man said. "Yes," he replied. "And you came back." "Yes." The older man smiled faintly. "Then you heard it." "Heard what?" "The sound of leaving without leaving," he said. "It's quieter than people expect." They walked together for a while, neither in a hurry. "Did you ever regret staying?" the man asked. The older man considered this carefully. "Regret isn't the right word," he said. "There are mornings when I remember other versions of myself. But they don't feel lost." "And the version you are now?" He tapped his cup lightly with one finger. "This one is full." The night deepened around them, stars settling into their places. "I don't know how long I'm meant to stay," the man said. The older man stopped walking. "That's good," he said. "If you knew, you'd stop listening." They stood together until the night shifted, until the sound of the town softened again. When the man returned to his room, he found a cup already waiting on the table. Empty. He sat down and placed his hands around it anyway. It was still warm. Chapter 7 The Night That Waits for an Answer. The night did not ask its question aloud. It never did. It waited. Mr. Hayashi sensed it as soon as the sky darkened fully. Not as pressure, not as unease, but as a widening space, like a pause held slightly longer than usual. He sat by the window, the lamp unlit. Outside, the town had settled into its familiar evening rhythm. Doors closed gently. Footsteps faded. Somewhere, dishes were washed and set aside. The ordinary sounds formed a quiet foundation. Above them, the stars appeared. Not all at once. One. Then another. Then several more, careful not to crowd one another. He watched without counting. The cup rested on the table beside him, untouched. He did not need to drink. The presence of it was enough. He listened. At first, there was only the night's usual texture, the wind testing the air, insects weaving thin lines of sound, the distant, steady breath of the hills. Then he noticed the pause. It was subtle, almost indistinguishable from silence, but it carried weight. The kind of weight that is asked to be acknowledged. "You don't have to answer," the woman's voice said from behind him. He turned slightly. She stood near the doorway, her presence calm, unintrusive. "I know," he replied. "But you're listening for the question anyway." "Yes." She nodded, as if that were expected. "That's how it begins." He looked back out at the stars. "What happens if I answer?" She joined him by the window, keeping a respectful distance. "Then the night will change how it listens to you." "And if I don't?" "It will keep waiting," she said. "The night is very patient." They stood together, the space between them filled not with words, but with shared attention. After a while, he spoke again. "I used to think questions were meant to be solved," he said. "That once you found the answer, they disappeared. And now? Now it feels like answering is just another way of staying with them." She smiled softly. "That's a good way to listen." Later, lying on his futon, he let his eyes remain open. The ceiling above him was dark, but not blank. Shadows shifted as the night breathed, slow and deliberate. He focused on his own breathing, letting it lengthen naturally. In, out. Between each breath, the pause stretched. That was where the question lived. Not in words, in timing. If he stayed, the town would continue to recognize him. Morning would keep learning his name. The cup would be filled again and again, always before the stars faded. If he left, the town would not disappear. It would remain exactly as it was, waiting at the edge of memory, ready to be listened to whenever the world grew too loud. Neither choice felt like a loss. That was the problem. Sleep came slowly, not because he resisted it, but because he was still listening when it arrived. The next morning, the woman poured tea as usual. "You slept lightly," she said. "Yes," he replied. She handed him the cup. The night stayed close. He nodded. "It's still waiting." She looked at him carefully. "So are you." They drank together, watching the sky pale, stars retreating without regret. The question did not demand an answer that morning. It simply remained, warm as the cup between his hands. Chapter 8: The Day That Pretends Not to Ask. Daytime in the town was convincing. Sunlight filled the streets with ordinary clarity. Shadows behaved as expected, falling cleanly behind objects and maintaining their distance. People spoke more, moved with purpose, and allowed time to show its usual shape. If someone arrived at noon, they might never suspect that the night left anything behind. Mr. Hayashi noticed, though. He noticed it in the way the air paused before a sound fully formed. In the way conversations ended a moment earlier than necessary. In the way people looked up at the sky, not searching, just checking. He spent the morning walking through the town, allowing daylight to reveal details he had previously missed. A crack in a stone wall repaired with care. A plant growing in a place where it should not have survived. A bench worn smooth at its center, where people tended to sit and wait rather than pass through. At the small shop, the woman behind the counter handed him his change without looking down. "You're still here," she said. "Yes," he replied. She nodded, satisfied. "Then the tea is still good." He smiled. "I've noticed." In the afternoon, he returned to the hills. The path was brighter now, easier to see, but it had not lost its quiet. Leaves shifted gently overhead, allowing light through in uneven patterns. Insects moved with purpose, unconcerned with being heard. He sat on the same stone as before. From here, the town looked almost ordinary. Almost. He closed his eyes. Even in full daylight, the listening remained. It was thinner, less concentrated, but present, woven into the hum of insects, the distant sound of voices, the faint clink of metal somewhere far below. The question stirred again, not insistently, patiently. He opened his eyes and stood. For the first time since arriving, he walked without listening closely. He let his steps fall where they would. Let sounds overlap. Let the day behave like a day. It felt louder. Not unpleasant. Just less precise. When he returned to the town, the woman was waiting near the doorway. "You walked differently today," she said. "I tried not to listen," he replied. She smiled knowingly. "And? It was harder than I expected." "That means you learned something," she said. He tilted his head. "What?" "That listening isn't something you turn on," she replied. "It's something you stop doing." That evening, clouds gathered. The stars did not appear right away. The sky remained dark but covered, holding its light close. They drank tea by the window, watching the reflection of the room instead of the sky. "Does the question change if the stars don't show?" he asked. "No," she said. "It just waits somewhere else." He considered that. "What if I never answer?" She lifted her cup. "Then you'll live with a good question." He laughed softly. "That sounds like something people say to make uncertainty feel noble." She smiled. "Does it work?" He thought for a moment. "A little." That night, rain began to fall. Not heavily. Just enough to rearrange the sound of the town. Drops tapped gently on roofs and leaves. The ground accepted them without complaint. The night grew closer, drawn in by the softer edges of the rain created. Lying awake, he listened to the way the rain filled the pauses the stars usually occupied. The question was still there. But now, it sounded less like a choice. More like a rhythm. Something that could be carried, rather than solved. Sleep came easily, wrapped in rain. In the morning, the air was clean. The woman poured tea and looked at him over the rim of her cup. "The day won't ask you anything," she said. "And the night?" he asked. She lowered the cup. "The night already has." He nodded, feeling the truth of it settle. Outside, the clouds began to thin. Somewhere above them, stars waited for their turn to return. Chapter 9 Carrying the Question. He began to carry it without noticing when it happened. The question did not announce itself. It did not change shape or grow heavier. It simply shifted from something that waited for him into something that walked beside him. In the morning, it rested in the space between sips of tea. In the afternoon, it settled into the rhythm of his steps. At night, it returned to its familiar place, breathing with the dark. He stopped thinking of it as something that needed an answer. Instead, it became a way of listening. "You seem lighter," the woman said one evening. "I haven't decided anything," he replied. She nodded. "That's why." They drank tea in comfortable silence. The stars were visible again tonight, scattered loosely, unconcerned with symmetry. They looked the way they always did, present, distant, unbothered by attention. "Do you remember the first night you stayed awake until the stars faded?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "I thought it was accidental." "And now?" "Now it feels like a habit," he replied. "Not a bad one." She smiled. "Habits are just choices that stopped asking permission." Days continued. He helped at the inn without being asked, carrying boxes, sweeping the entrance, refilling water. No one thanked him explicitly. No one needed to. The town adjusted. When he passed, conversations bent slightly, then resumed. When he paused, sounds waited, then continued. He did not belong here in the way someone born here did. But he was no longer a visitor. One afternoon, the older man joined him on the path to the hills. "You're carrying it well," the older man said. "The question?" he asked. "Yes," he replied. "Most people either drop it or let it weigh them down." "What did you do?" he asked. The older man smiled. "I learned how to set it down sometimes." They sat on the stone together, looking out over the town. "Will I know when to answer?" he asked. The older man shook his head. "You'll know when you stop needing to." That night, he dreamed again. This time, there was a cup. It was neither full nor empty. Steam rose from it steadily, never diminishing, never thickening. He held it without drinking. When he woke, the image remained not vivid, but present. He did not try to interpret it. Morning arrived gently. He drank his tea slowly, watching the sky pale, stars retreating without hesitation. For the first time, he did not follow their movement. He listened instead to what stayed behind. As evening approached, he packed his bag. The act felt familiar, but not urgent. Each item made a soft sound as it was placed inside, acknowledged by the room. The woman watched from the doorway. "You're leaving," she said. "Yes," he replied. "Soon?" "Tomorrow," he said. "Before the stars fade." She nodded. "That's a good time." He paused. "I might come back." She smiled. "Then the tea will be ready." That night, he stayed awake. Not because he needed to, but because he wanted to mark the hour. The stars faded as they always did, quietly, without ceremony. He lifted his cup and drank the last of the tea. It tasted the same. That was the comfort of it. The question rested easily inside him now. Not answered. Not abandoned. Carried. Chapter 10. Before departure, after listening. The town sounded different on the last morning. Not quieter. Not louder. More complete. Mr. Hayashi woke before dawn, as he had for many mornings now. The room held the faint outline of night, corners still shadowed, air still cool. He did not rush. He folded the futon carefully, smoothing it with both hands, as if returning something that had been borrowed. Each movement carried a small sound, and each sound settled into the room without resistance. Outside, the sky hovered in its familiar in-between state. Night had not yet released its grip, but morning was already present, waiting. He stepped outside with his bag. The road was empty. Houses rested quietly, their windows dark, their walls holding the memory of warmth. Somewhere, water moved through pipes. Somewhere else, a bird shifted, not yet ready to sing. He walked toward the station. His footsteps sounded the same as they always had, but he noticed something new. They did not echo. They were received. The woman stood near the entrance of the inn, holding 2 cups. "You're early," she said. "So are you," he replied. She handed him one. For the road. He accepted it with both hands. They stood together, steam rising between them, fading into the dim air. "I didn't answer it," he said quietly. She shook her head. "You did." He looked at her. "I did?" "Yes," she said. "You answered by carrying it." He considered that, then nodded. "Will it be different out there?" he asked. She glanced toward the horizon, where light was beginning to thin the dark. "The world is louder," she said. "But you'll hear the pauses now." He smiled faintly. "And if I forget?" She smiled back. "Then you'll know where to find us." The station appeared just as it had before. Platform empty. Timetable unchanged. Rails stretching away, patient and open. He sat on the bench and listened. The station did not ask him to stay. It did not hurry him to leave. It simply waited. When the train arrived, its sound rose gently, then settled. Doors opened with a familiar sigh. He stepped inside. As the train began to move, the town slipped past the window, not receding so much as folding back into itself. The stars were almost gone now. Later, far from the mountains, in a room filled with unfamiliar sounds, Mr. Hayashi lay awake. The city breathed around him, traffic, distant voices, electricity humming through walls. Sound here did not pause easily. But he knew where to listen. Between one noise and the next, there was still a space. Small, fragile, real. He placed a cup on the table beside his bed. It was empty. He wrapped his hands around it anyway. For a moment, it felt warm. Far away, in the small town, morning arrived fully. The woman poured water into a cup and set it by the window. Steam rose. Outside, the last of the night dissolved, stars gone, sky pale and open. She listened. Somewhere, a familiar sound was missing. That was all right. The night had finished. The tea was ready. And the space between them remained. Epilogue. After the stars have gone. Time passed. Not in a way that could be measured easily, but in the way sound changes when one grows used to it. Days gathered. Nights thinned and returned. The question continued to travel with him, light enough to forget, steady enough to notice when it shifted. Mr. Hayashi did not speak of the town often. When he did, it was never directly. He would mention the way tea tasted better when allowed to cool slightly, or how the quiet just before dawn felt different from any other silence, or how some pauses deserved attention more than words. People listened. Some understood without asking why. Most did not need to. At night, in his apartment, he sometimes woke before the alarm. The city was never fully quiet, but he had learned how to listen between its sounds. In the brief spaces between passing cars, between distant voices, between his own breaths, something familiar waited. Not the town itself, but the way of being there. He would sit up, place a cup on the table, and rest his hands around it. Sometimes it was filled. Sometimes it was not. The difference mattered less than it once had. Far away, the town remained. The inn stood where it always had. The road curved gently upward. The hills listened without effort. The woman continued her habit. Each night, before the stars faded, she heated water. She placed a cup on the table by the window. She poured slowly, allowing the steam to rise and disappear. Sometimes she drank alone. Sometimes she poured 2 cups and waited a little longer than usual. She did not expect anyone. The expectation was too loud for this hour. But listening was not. On certain mornings, when the stars had already gone, and the sky was pale and undecided, she would pause with the cup in her hands. There were moments, brief, delicate ones, when the space in the room felt slightly fuller. As if a sound, long carried elsewhere, had brushed past on its way through. She would smile then, not because someone had returned, but because someone, somewhere, was still listening. The stars continued to fade each morning. They always would. And before they did, somewhere in the world, someone would pause with a cup of tea. Held gently, neither full nor empty, listening to the space that remained when night finished speaking. That was enough. The night did not need more than that. Neither did the morning. And neither, now, did he.